So anyway, today we'll start easy yin on our backs in a banana pose. So you just come onto your back, move your hips over to the right edge of the mat, and then just take your legs over. I like to cross one ankle over the other, but ultimately that's optional. And then reach up, and for most of you, you'll want to sort of wiggle your upper body over until you feel a stretch here in your right waist and ribs, okay? And that's the target area for this particular posture. Okay, so we will gradually switch sides here. And as I often encourage you, you might pause for a moment and just feel both sides. My hope is that eventually you'll be able to feel a difference between the two sides, and that will start to make you more conscious of what is happening when we do yoga and we do this on a conscious level. So what do I mean by that? Why do I say eventually? Because some of you, maybe the very first time you felt the difference. The reason I say eventually is, again, I've been doing this for decades. I've seen a lot. And people come to yoga with different levels of body awareness and self-awareness. So again, if you're new to these concepts or these ideas, these are things that you may not be aware of at all because they're not things that are talked about in casual conversation. So these are things that maybe psychologists know about, yoga teachers know about, healers, maybe people who teach deep spirituality, which can be very different than like a religious figure. So I just want to make that clear. Again, religion is a set of beliefs or dogmas that you subscribe to. That's fine. I'm not trying to put that down or make that wrong or evil, but spirituality is something that you actually experience. And so a spiritual teacher or guide is someone who can actually lead you to have certain experiences that transform your view. And that's true in any religion, right? Or any tradition. So there are, Christian spiritual teachers who can guide you into a very deep experience of, say, experiencing Jesus in your own heart, right? Now that to a common person, that doesn't make sense, or it sounds very woo-woo or fantastical. But again, having lived in this world for so long, I know that there are people who can do that. Same with a Buddhist teacher. They can lead you to the experience of emptiness that is talked about a lot in Buddhism. So we have all these terms, and our mind has an idea about what that means, but in reality, it may not be what your mind is thinking, right? Because I'm sure we all think we know what emptiness is, and most of us are going to think, well, that's not desirable. I don't want to experience emptiness, right? But that's one of the major goals in a Buddhist approach to experiencing the truth of reality. And what's interesting about that particular term is modern quantum physics tells us that basically reality is empty, that those walls, your body, everything that seems so solid and real, we talked a little bit about this the other week, they're not solid. It's mostly empty space. This, my chest and all this feels so real, so solid. It's mostly empty space with a little bit of energy, what we might call waves of energy. And that creates, for me, a very real experience of solidity and form and shape, but that doesn't mean that that's the ultimate reality. All right, let's go ahead and unwind from that. Okay, we'll bring our legs in and we'll squeeze, shake it out. And then hinge up when you're ready. Second set, half butterfly. So this is a hamstring stretch, right leg straight, left foot to the inside of the thigh. Feel free to use support under your forearms, forehead, left knee, or you can sit on a block as well. And again, the stretches here, as always, we need to feel safe. We need to be comfortable enough to hold it, okay? Okay, so returning to my initial point, many people, without realizing it, so almost anyone in this condition will not know they're in this condition, and that's important to understand, okay? Similarly, like someone who's a narcissist doesn't come to you and say, hey, I'm a narcissist. The sociopath doesn't come to you and say, hey, I'm a sociopath. You should be very careful. Okay, psychopath, same thing. So when we are suffering from a mental or emotional wound or condition or disorder, we don't tend to recognize it. Okay, so again, for you, you're just living life, and again, it's not about anyone being evil or bad or, evil intent. It's just about recognizing these things. Because when you recognize what I'm talking about, it means there's room for growth, which means ultimately that there's room for you to live a more full life, a happier life, a healthier life, a more full life, okay? So what I want to talk about today, what I was talking about earlier, is embodiment. Embodiment, okay? So very common when people come to yoga, you're encouraging them to feel their body and to be more in tune with their body and what they're experiencing. And some people, they can't do that. If I say, hey, let's stretch this side, and then do you feel the difference between that side and the other side? They're kind of like, no, I don't really feel my body. Now, I'll say this, generally speaking, so all other things being equal, and all things are never equal, but all other things being equal, men tend to be more disembodied than women. Women tend to have more body awareness in general. Now, again, there are exceptions. If you were traumatized, sexually abused, other things like that, then you as a woman can completely be disembodied too. Okay, so again, we can't generalize too much. And that's usually what takes people out of their body, is the idea that it's not okay to feel it. Let's switch sides. Okay, so we're stretching the left thigh here. Now again, disembodiment comes at different levels. Some people might be like, well, do I feel it? I don't know. I'm not sure where. I feel something. I'm not sure where. Or again, at a very extreme level, no, I don't feel anything, even though you do. Now, one of the reasons that it's possible that men are generally more disembodied is emotions are actually felt in the body. I don't know if you've ever really broke this down, but again, having done this for so long, it's fairly obvious to me. And they've done experiments where they put people on laughing gas, which relaxes all your muscles. I think it's nitric oxide or something. Anyway, they put people on laughing gas and all their muscles relax. And then they try and tell them very bad news. They try and get them upset. And from what I understand, they can't get upset. They can't feel upset. They might recognize, oh, that's horrible, but they don't feel upset. Why? Because, at least if this is correct, a negative emotion is a contraction in your body. It's a tightening of viscera or muscles around viscera or different parts of your body, right? So when you get stressed out, if you were to break it down, the next time you were stressed out, if I were there and I could say, hold on, what exactly are you feeling in your body? You might be like, well, I feel a lot of tension in my shoulders, and I feel this sinking feeling in my stomach, and there's a knot in my throat, and there'd be other physical things going on. Now, what you've learned to do is just call that anxious or afraid or jealous or angry, those various contractions that you're feeling in your body. That's just what we learned growing up. Oh, you're upset. Oh, you're angry. Oh, you're afraid. Oh, you're jealous. So we just slap a label on that. But if we were to actually break it down, what we'd find is those emotions are actually felt in the body. Now, what does that have to do with men? Well, maybe it's different today. I don't know. But traditionally, in traditional agricultural structures, where the roles of men and women are stratified. Generally, men are not encouraged to feel emotions, at least in the West. I can't speak for, but it seems to be pretty universal in agricultural type structures. The men are always strong. They're not emotional. They're not supposed to feel a lot of emotions. They're not supposed to express a lot of emotions. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of this. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, shake it out. And then let's go ahead and hinge. Okay, frog. So tabletop with the knees wide. So pretty much as wide as they'll go. And then you can stay on hands or come down to your forearms. You can rest your forehead on a block. And the stretch is in here, the inside of the thigh, okay? Again, these postures should be all fairly straightforward. As long as you don't have an injury, if you're fairly healthy, and especially if you've done a few yin classes before, this should be like no-brainer for most, if not all of you. But let me know if you're having a hard time for some reason. All right, so if you're tracking what I'm saying, if you're following along, and if that makes sense, and again, I'm really just sharing things that I've sort of learned from other people, from scientific research, and also somewhat from my own experience. But usually the things I share are things that aren't solely my own experience. I like to what I call triangulate things, especially things that I share publicly and with others, and as a in teaching, which means that I might have a personal experience. I might also read something from, like, say, the scientific literature, or from a doctor, or something like that, some kind of a maybe expert source, like again, a doctor, scientist, a researcher, something like that, a paper, a research paper, or study. And then oftentimes I also look to the tradition, the yogic tradition, the Taoist tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Christian mystic tradition, the Kabbalah, these different spiritual traditions. And so my favorite thing to share is usually something where I've seen a correlation with all three. That's my favorite. I'm not saying that's everything, but that's the sweet spot for me, where I see the Western scientific medical community and research beginning to verify things that these ancient spiritual seers experienced. And then I like to experience it myself. So there are occasionally things I share that I've not experienced myself that I might say, here's what the science says, or here's what the tradition says. But generally speaking, I like to triangulate in that way. For me, that has the most validity, and that's what I'm going to feel the most confident sharing. So anyway, let's assume that what I've laid out is true. You may or may not believe it, that's fine, but let's just, for now, just say, okay, emotions are felt in the body. So if I don't have a body, I'm not going to feel emotion. Well, if you're a young man and you experience what I experience, which is when you're crying, or you're upset, or you're emotional, you're told, Douglas, big boys don't cry. You're a big boy now. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to get upset. Well, what is one solution to that problem? What if you are upset? What if you are emotional? What if you are crying? How do you handle that? How do you deal with that? Well, if emotions are in your body, don't feel your body. Don't pay attention to what you're feeling in your body. That's not important. That isn't to be trusted, right? It gets you in trouble because when I cry, I get in trouble, I get scolded, I get told I'm not a man. And I don't want to be told that. So body, feeling the body, no good. I'm not going to do that. All right, let's come on out of that. Next posture. Again, we're not going to rest just yet because we're doing 2 postures per set. So we come forward onto our belly, Sphinx or seal pose, okay? And you want to feel it in your back. So today for me, that's going to mean doing the seal, which is arms straight. You see it pushes me into a deeper back bend. Legs can be together, apart, or in full lotus. Head held up, drop forward, drop back. Shoulders depressed or relaxed, okay? So again, it makes perfect sense. You know, I've been told since I was little that I'm a boy or I'm a man. And then I'm doing some behavior at a certain age, and, you know, the adults, the humans who I trust, you know, and I love and who are supposed to be guiding me through life, they come along and say, hey, you know, you're supposed to be a man and you're not acting manly. So they don't necessarily give you a way to process or to deal with your emotions, or how did they just tell you, shut it off, stop it, right? Stop crying. And so as a, you know, as a young boy, you're like, okay, how do I make that happen? Well, if I don't feel this body thing, then I'm okay. So with our bodies, what can happen to some people, and again, this isn't just men, it can happen to women too. But what can happen with our bodies and what we try and undo in yoga is we can get to the point where we tend to only notice extremes of pleasure and pain. So of course a man is still, you know, if you take his arm and you push a needle into it, he's going to feel that. He's not completely disembodied, right? But you might say there's a sort of a numbing that's happened. So he's less sensitive to what he's feeling in his body. And so therefore he comes to yoga, we start doing things, okay, do you feel that? Can you feel the left and right side are different? He might very well be like, no, I don't. Meaning that he hasn't allowed that level of sensitivity, hasn't allowed himself to feel that level of sensitivity. One of the reasons for this, again, as I've highlighted, is that if he did, he might start to feel emotions. And again, he might have learned, depending on his upbringing. I'm not saying this happens to every boy or every man, but he might have learned that, like, that's dangerous. Because again, he gets in trouble, he gets told he's not a man. You know, if he's vulnerable, if he's sensitive, if he's emotional, oh, that's not manly. You can't do that. Stop that. So even though you might encourage him, hey, you know what, you're going to be happier, you're going to be healthier, you're going to take better care of your body naturally if you allow yourself to feel your body more. For one thing, he may not know how to undo that. So just come on down and rest. And I'd say the vast majority of men don't. Again, I'll say this, the vast majority of men don't even know that that's the condition they're in. It's interesting, I had a conversation with a student who interviewed me for her channel or podcast or whatever, and she wanted to talk about, you know, the yin and the yang, male and female and all this stuff. And one of the things I said, which I stand by, is I don't really feel like men are okay. the narrative right now is that women have been oppressed and women need support and women need help, which I don't disagree with. But my point in that, one of the points I was trying to make is you don't have half a society sick and then the other half well. So I think the narrative has been women are not okay. Men are doing great because look at them. They've got power and they've got money and they got all this stuff. Well, I don't think men are doing great. Even if they earn more, even if they have more power, if you can't feel anything and you can't feel your body and you're disembodied, you are not living a good life. In addition to this, most men don't even know. If you ask most men, are you doing awesome? Is your life great? They'll be like, yeah, it's great. They don't even know that there's a whole nother level at which they could experience life. All right, let's go ahead and come on. Well, no, we'll do a cattail. We'll do a counter stretch and then cattail. So just bend our knees. We're going to bring our feet side to side. Let our hips rock a little bit. And then to do the cattail, let's see, how do I want to do this? We'll bring the left leg up. I'm going to turn. Bring the left leg up. Okay. Right leg back. Prop our head up here. And then we bend the bottom knee, reach back, and grab the foot. And we pull the heel in towards the buttocks. So again, in the current landscape, social landscape, there's been a lot of talk about things like toxic masculinity and all these kinds of things. And I don't deny that that exists, but again, how do you get toxic masculinity? Well, maybe you get it by teaching young boys that in order to be a man, they can't feel their emotions. And again, for most men, that's going to mean not really being in tune with their body. So if I had to guess, and I'm just guessing, I mean, I don't have any science behind this, I would imagine most men who are toxically masculine are probably not men who eat particularly well or take particularly good care of their health. Again, I'm sure there's exceptions to the rules and, you know, all this, but what I would theorize, what I would expect to see is toxic men or toxic masculinity is very often going to come, again, with a certain level of disembodiment. Because again, when we begin to feel the body, we begin to feel our emotions. And there's a fair number of men who have been taught, again, from no fault of their own. So I really want to make that clear. I'm not trying to demonize anybody. I actually think both men and women are the victim of the current state of where we are socially. And I don't think any one group or person controls the social, dynamic completely. There can be, influencers, there can be media outlets, there can be all kinds of things, but no one's in total control, right? There's not an Illuminati or any one group that can control large groups of people. And there's a whole field of scientific research, about large systems and how difficult they are to predict and control, right? So social dynamics is like that. It's very hard to know and predict with complete accuracy how a piece of information or a piece of technology or whatever, the effect it's going to have on human beings as a whole, because that's really what we're talking about, right? Social conditioning and social norms and social narrative. This is where, big boys don't cry. That's a social idea or narrative. Obviously boys cry, right? Obviously men cry. Obviously men have emotions. But
at a certain point in time, it's seen as, oh, well, we don't want them to feel their emotions. So we're going to tell them as they're growing up, hey, that's not okay. That's not okay. You're feeling your emotions. You need to stop that, right? And we'll do that through usually shame and blame, you know. Oh, you're a big boy now. You're not supposed to be crying. All right, let's switch sides. So you might think that what I'm describing is, you know, a pretty far extreme of disembodiment, but actually there's a further level of disembodiment, and this might be experienced more often by women, but again, there's no hard and fast rule here. But what it is actually what I would call complete disembodiment, where you actually leave your body. The reason I say it may have been experienced, maybe experienced more by women, is in my own personal experience, I've really only met women who have described this to me. So I'm not saying it can't happen to men or it doesn't, but you know, I've known several women who've experienced this and described this to me. I haven't really met any men who describe this to me. So this is where you actually experience a kind of what can I say? What's the right word I'm looking for? Out of body experience, for lack of a better way of putting it. You actually kind of like leave, your consciousness essentially leaves your body. So you are essentially numb to your body completely. Now, again, this might be, in some cases, again, I'm just reporting what I was told, okay? So it might sound really woo-woo, and I know a lot of people, you know, growing up in the culture we grow up in, a lot of people hear anything woo-woo and they immediately begin rolling their eyes and thinking, that's not true, that's bullshit, you know, you know, this is some woo-woo stuff. And honestly, I don't know what's possible, what's not. So if I trust someone and they're reporting their experience, I'm going to assume that's what they experienced, okay? However they experienced it. I don't know whether they actually left their body or not. That's not really my place to say, okay? But yes, that's essentially what some people have reported. And these are generally people who've been through trauma, often sexual trauma. They've been sexually abused. And so they learned to not actually be in their body while the abuse was happening. They learned to be elsewhere. Sometimes they were like on the ceiling looking down at their body, or up in a tree looking down at their body. Sometimes they're just off in like la la land, like someplace else completely. And then once their body was no longer under threat, their consciousness would return to the body. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that. Okay, you can press back, give yourself a little shake out. And when you're ready, let's transition into square shoelace. So square pose at its most basic is just, I guess, what some people call crisscross applesauce. I never said that growing up, so I don't, you know, but I've heard that several times. So just sitting with your legs crossed. Okay, if you come forward, you don't feel any stretch, then just take this foot up like that, and generally that'll do it. Okay, so we're looking for the stretch here. And then for some people, I think this is what I'll do today, they actually sort of lock their knees or cross their knees and then come forward like that. And again, right here is where we're looking for the stretch. All right, so what does this have to do with what we're doing? It has a lot to do with what we're doing, because in the two classes, and I do want to emphasize that the other class is important for this as well. So many of you attend both classes. I know scheduling wise, it's not possible for everybody, but again, I would encourage you, if you have the time, because there's a lot of value in the other class, because the other class very often does a better job of simulating physical, mental, and emotional stress in our life. Now, stress is unavoidable, but how we deal with stress is a skill that we can learn. And I would say this is one of the most valuable skills you will learn from training in yoga, period. Unfortunately, yoga has gotten mixed up with like fitness. The good trend that I see right now is fitness is sort of tracking towards spirituality, for lack of a better way of putting it. There are many apps and programs and Peloton and all these different things where they have like workouts, but then they'll also have like meditation. Okay, that's new. Okay, when I was growing up, meditation and working out had nothing to do with one another. If you're interested in working out, you probably had no interest in meditating. But again, as the science becomes more and more conclusive, it becomes hard for someone whose interest is in being healthy, optimizing their health. It becomes hard for them to deny that meditation is a part of that. Why? What's so important about meditation? It is huge in terms of helping you manage and deal with your stress. If we were to ever add, I don't think we will, but if we were to ever add a third Breitbart class, my vote would be that we did a type of meditation like midweek, because that would really kind of complete the trifecta of, we've got the very vigorous movement-oriented class where, again, we really can work on cultivating equanimity in stressful situations. In yin, we're beginning to learn to slow down and to, again, perhaps feel a little deeper and to allow something. Because as intense as the Monday class can be at points, we're not really holding anything or doing anything for longer than 30 seconds or a minute. That's not really that long, okay? There really isn't that much I need to manage. But in yin, let's say we're doing something that is somewhat uncomfortable, or again, maybe you're beginning to tune into your body for the first time in years or decades, and maybe it's just a part of your body. I've known students who they have specific areas in their body that they can't feel. Specific areas. And again, learning what I've learned about, trauma and from psychology, because psychology and spirituality, they overlap. They're not the same thing. I'm not a psychologist, but I learn a lot by studying some of the findings in psychology. And there's a lot of the same findings in the ancient yogic tradition. It's very psychological. Some people have even described Buddhism as basically a type of ancient psychology. They say it's not a religion, it's not really spirituality. They say it's actually psychology. It's not a philosophy, it's just psychology. I can see why someone would say that. The truth is, I don't think it's just psychology, but it's very psychological in nature. So, what can happen to us is, if I have trauma, and it's related with a certain specific thing or body part. So again, sexual trauma can be very located in one area. Then I might experience a lot of dysfunction, a lot of pain, a lot of other things that go on related with a body part or body parts. So let's say that I'm used to not feeling a certain part of my body. Let's say my hips. Okay? Because again, this whole region can be part of that. So let's say I'm used to I don't feel my hips. It's just not something I do. It's not safe. And again, I'll remind you, it's not usually conscious. Okay? People don't usually go around saying, yeah, I don't feel my hips. It's just not something I do. It's just, ooh, I don't like the way that pose feels. Oh, I don't like doing that. That just doesn't feel right. That's more the reaction, right? It's a feeling of discomfort and then an aversion to doing a thing. That's usually the way it shows up. So again, if you want to know where you may have this kind of thing, what do you avoid in your life? What do you just sort of say no to? One of the examples I'll often give is like, what if you just hate cocktail parties, right? I just hate cocktail parties. I avoid them at all costs. Well, there might be something there, maybe not in your body, but a deficiency story. People don't like me. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid that I'll be judged. And again, usually not conscious. It's usually not, you're not thinking that on a conscious level. What you're saying is, I don't like cocktail parties. What you've not usually done is asked why. Why not? Okay? And if you dig into that, you might find that there's this these unconscious fears and feeling of deficiency that drives that disdain or dislike for cocktail parties or whatever it is. Maybe you don't like being on stage. Maybe you don't like giving public, addressing people in public or groups in public, right? Could be whatever. All right, let's come on out of that, make our way onto our back. When you're ready, bring your legs in, give them a nice shake out. And then let's finish with twisted roots. So right knee over left, and then we just drop those knees to the left. You can play around with the arm, leg, and head position. So getting a nice twist on here. So again, the flow class, psychologically speaking, okay, so I'm not talking about the physical benefits today. This is kind of more of a psychological talk we're on today. And again, if you're wondering why am I talking about psychology, it's because it's always been a part of the yoga tradition. So again, as a yoga teacher, I'm not just a fitness coach. And again, what I love about modern fitness is it's slowly moving toward yoga, right? Whereas a lot of people 10, 20 years ago, they tried to divorce yoga from, the psychological and the philosophical part of its tradition and just say, well, this is just fitness. This is just exercise. That's all it is. But again, what you see, it's not overt, but it's creeping. There's this sort of creep happening in fitness where, yes, meditation is starting to become a part of that discussion. And so once you open that door, you're starting to open the door to, again, more of this psychological aspect to it. And it makes sense. As human beings, we don't just have a physical body. We have a psychology. We have emotions. We have thoughts. We have beliefs. We have ideas. And in order for us to really be happy and healthy, we probably need to examine each and every one of these things. And for me, yoga does a good job of that, depending on how you approach it. But again, I don't approach it just as a physical thing. So the two classes we have here, the Monday, again, very good at helping us to begin to look at maybe acute stress or a highly impactful, stressful situation. How do we handle that? Can we learn to breathe through that? Can we learn to relax as we're feeling, our blood racing and our heart pumping, and we're sweating and we're hot and we feel flush and we feel all this energy. Can I just learn to take the next breath and to be present with all of that sensation in my body? Okay. And can I actually learn to feel all that sensation? Because again, some people can do a whole workout and not feel anything, essentially, right? They're essentially disembodied. So they're just like, body do this, body do that. Now you might think that that's awesome. You might think, oh, cool. Yeah, my body's just this robot and I just ask it to do things and it does it. And it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it gets. It just keeps going, right? Sounds awesome, right? Well, I'll tell you the problem with that. And again, I've seen this in practice. This isn't just a theory. So I had a friend when I first started teaching who worked at a studio with me, and she was a physical therapist. And she would have students who'd come to her with pain in their ankles or knees or various parts of their body. Now, invariably, what she would tell me is like, oh, they have these injuries that are very common for runners. And she would say, it's really not possible to get that kind of an injury without experiencing a lot of pain over time. So in other words, the injury doesn't come from you are running one day and something happened. That's not how those injuries she was describing happen. They happen by you're starting to wear out a part of your body, and your body is starting to generate pain signals. The way you create the injury that needs the surgery or the physical therapy is you ignore the pain signal for a long time. This is the problem with disembodiment. We might think like pain is bad, pain is evil, I want to get rid of pain. Pain is a signal, it's a communication. If you stick your hand in a fire, you want to feel pain. Why? Because if you didn't, you would just leave it there and your hand would burn away. And then you'd be like, what happened to my hand? It was here a minute ago. Well, you didn't feel the pain. And again, I, as a man in our current environment, I'm not speaking for all men, I'm speaking for myself, but I see it in other men, whether they see it or not. Again, this is happening to a lot of men. So again, I don't think you have half a society sick. I don't think you can have women oppressed and suffering and men perfectly healthy, perfectly happy, riding high, enjoying themselves. I just don't think that that is possible, and that's not what I see happening. What I do see happening right now is women are getting a lot of support. And so far, men are not getting it. They're not getting the tools. They're not getting the education. They're not even being told that, something's off or wrong. And when they stand up and say, hey, there's something not right here, they're very often, it's thrown back in their face. And they're saying, well, look at what's happening to women. Okay, again, I'm not denying that what's happening to women is wrong. What I'm saying is the whole society is sick. It's not just women who have a problem, it's also men. The problem is, you could say, which is worse? The person who's sick and knows she's sick and goes to the doctor and says, hey, doctor, I think I'm sick. Or the person who's sick and doesn't know. Which one is really sicker? Okay? Again, you might think, oh, well, I would rather not know. You're a lot more likely to die, right? If you don't get help. Which would you rather be? The cancer patient who finds out early she has cancer and treats it? Or the person who goes years without realizing they have cancer, it gets to stage 4, and then they die? Seemingly suddenly, right? Because the cancer's so advanced.
All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that. So, in wrapping up, I'm not trying to make today's class about advocating for men or anything like that. Rather, I'm really trying to encourage all of you to begin to do the work of really moving into your body more and more with awareness. And again, both classes will help with that. And then again, meditation, also a huge part of that. And currently we don't do that in this format, but if you ever check out my Patreon page, I have things there. You can reach out to me personally. I can teach you that if you're interested. But really, that's the trifecta for me in teaching is the active movement, the passive movement, and then the stillness of the meditation. That's really helps create a lot of self-awareness. And why do we want that? Because again, in my experience, that's the only way you're going to experience really deep levels of embodiment and joy in this life. Deep peace, lasting peace and joy. Otherwise, you're riding a roller coaster of I'm winning, I'm losing, I'm winning, I'm losing, I'm winning, I'm losing. And in the end, we all die, right? So it's like we lose in the end. But with these tools, you don't really experience that anymore. It all becomes a type of winning. All right, let's bring our legs in, give them a little shake out. And then you can set your timer and rest for the next few minutes.